So last time I did the curtains. They are now in a complete assembly state. So this one goes here. Come on. Yeah, something like this. And now it's time for them to be returned to their rightful owner, the shutter crate. Now, before I start, I lost all 3 screws that keep the shutter crate connected to the rest of the body, and I got some replacements. They all match, so the threads or the pitch of the thread is correct. Length, I think these two are a bit long. This one is about right, and this one might be just a bit short, but one of the screws, I think this one, needs to thread in this hole, and on top of the hole there's the rangefinder, so there's limited space anyhow. We'll see how it goes. Every time I happen to come across a camera that is not fixable, I take it apart and save everything. So I've got lots of screws, actually not really lots of screws, but I have a little film canister that has enough screws to get me going. And one more thing, I see lots of ads, at least locally in this part of the world, about Russian cameras advertised as being in working order. And there is no such thing as a Soviet camera in working order that hasn't already been serviced. This is a Fed 3. It was advertised just as I said, as being in working order and everything being functional. Well, first of all, the prism of the rangefinder is not functional. It has a separation between the two surfaces, and you pretty much can't see anything through it. But what I wanted to show you, so shutter curtains, this one is so-so. This one has a more cardboardish feel to it, so it's already dried up. Now the shutter is set to 1/25. You might say that it works, right? Because you can see the slit is decent. And now I will take it to, oh, and you can probably hear that metal sound. That's usually the sound of lack of lubrication. I will now put it on bulb. And now 1/30. This is the real state of the shutter. So they are barely moving, but once I set the shutter to a higher speed, it will work, because I guess there's more inertia due to what I said last time with the drum being influenced by the shaft and so on. But yeah, that was the idea. There is no working Soviet camera unless serviced. Alright. And now for the funny bit, taking this guy back into this guy. I don't know if my method is the best. It's not what Meisenberg describes in its book about Soviet cameras, but it's what works for me, I suppose. we have these 4 shims. Let me get the power off the phone. Okay. So the 4 little shims that are supposed to be between this part and the crate. The simplest way to make them stick is to use just a little bit of oil. Now I am going to I guess I'll just oil them as I put them on. This end part of the shaft also needs to be oiled because it spins in that hole of the shutter crate. All right, and now this is the crate, this is the shutter. I will have to take it like this. Initially the position of this gear in respect to that gear is irrelevant because you just want to get it in. In other Soviet cameras like the Zorki 4, it's a lot easier to get everything back together because this shaft protrudes out of the casing and it has a bushing, a nut, a locking nut. So once this is in position, you tighten the locking nut and it will not move around. Okay, now this is the first curtain and this one has to be put in place first. And the second curtain needs to be on top of the first one. Alright. Now I have to put the locking nut of this one. Alright. Now for the second roller. Alright. Now I should apply some tension to the rollers so that they can pull the ribbons and the curtains on this side, because it will be a lot easier to get the correct positioning while trying to put everything back in the crate. This thing is really in the way. I can't use my my little key. Actually, I might be able to just barely use it. Now I need to make sure that no shim has escaped, and I need to make sure this is going to be a bit of a nightmare, that I have enough tension in the rollers to actually keep everything where I need them to be. Okay, I had one first attempt that was a disaster, so I'll give it another go. This is the second curtain. It needs to be on top of the first one. Alright. While on this part, the first one needs to be on top of the second one. So they intertwine. It's like an 8. These are the shims that go here. One is already on the shaft. Right, and now we need to get everything back together. So the shaft of the first curtain goes first. Alright, while the ribbon of the second curtain must remain over the roller. So if it slips, it might get caught between the roller and this part, or on the other side, and it would be very tricky to get it out of there. the second one. If you don't have any tension on in the system, everything will be floppy, and if it's floppy, it's very hard to work with. Ideally, I'll get some initial tension on the two rollers. It's a lot harder to do on this shutter because I can't use my key, my locking key, because it has this bracket that's bolted on. I will need to see if I can do it without the key. This second roller seems easier. Okay. And for this one, I will have to get one of these locking screws back in place because the thread of the shaft is not machined well and the locking nut is not screwing on as it should be. Alright, and this should be keeping everything in place. Okay, and now I need to find the position for the uncocked shutter. Now it's somewhere in the middle. This metal bar is here, it should be somewhere around here. So for this, now I can't twist it clockwise anymore because of the restricting gear. So with this position in mind, I will take this off, unwind it about there. I've lost a shim. And put it back. And now I can wind the shutter. This is the maximum position, and unwind the shutter for that maximum position. We'll try for this position of that gear in respect to the other gear and see what happens. Okay. Now, when you put it back in the crate, you will have to make sure, come on, just stay still. You'll have to make sure that the cutout, either this rectangular one or the round hole, depending on model, is counterclockwise to this piece. So I will just hold it like that with my finger on the drum and try to get everything together. Now I'm looking at the cutout and I see it's like about 9 o'clock. I will rotate this pin, so this gear that is connected to the pin, so that the pin is like, let's say, earlier than 9 o'clock. Right now, if it stays like this, so in the same orientation, it's like 7 o'clock. Alright, get the shaft through that hole, make sure the light shield is not poking into anything, And then, while slightly pressing these two parts against one another, rotate this clockwise slowly until it falls in position. That's the moment when that pin engage with that slot. Turn it around, fiddle with this a bit until that pin goes into the hole. Keep everything tight, and now fiddle with the two rollers until they match their holes. This is one. The other I can't see, so I will just move around until it should be in its hole, but I can't really feel it. No, I think this is it. And now I think I need to get a screw here. Okay, and now, yeah, total mess. I'll get to that in a moment. And now I will have to get some tension on this one. Oh, this is not in the correct place because I can't turn it. Whew. All right, this sucks. All right, after several tries and lots of new swear words, I finally managed to get it back together. And it was actually the first time I did so without tension on the rollers. So the rollers are completely untensed, well, almost completely untensed. The problem was that these locking nuts simply don't want to go all the way down. So when you screw them, there's a gap between the bottom of the locking nut and the bottom plate. Now, maybe that's normal in, I don't know, pretty much every camera except the Soviet ones, but it's very rare on the Soviet, or at least it was very rare on the Soviet cameras that I worked on. Usually they screw all the way down and they pretty much lock the central shaft, so they lock the tension without the need for these little locking screws. And that's a good thing because it allows for easier adjustment and easier repositioning of the shutter. All right, now because I couldn't screw them all the way down, the shafts were super wobbly and I simply couldn't get it back together. It was horrible. Now, when you get the shutter back, so the shutter crate back in the body, there is one very important thing that you must pay attention to, and that is the way this gear, so the gear on the drum or on the shaft, it's actually on the shaft with the rollers, not the drum, the way it mates with this gear, this is the limiting gear. And this is what I said last time about, or this time, I don't remember, about the Zorki 4 being, I think this time, this video, the Zorki 4 being the easier camera to work on. Because since in the Zorki 4 the limiting groove is on this gear and it simply swivels how should I say it, the pin that engages that groove in the locking gear is part of the bottom plate, and the gear that's part of the shaft simply rotates obviously around its axis, and the groove sits on top of that pin, and that means there is only one way of putting it back. You can't you can't get it wrong, as long as when you wind the shutter the curtain goes from here to here, you are fine. There is no correct mating. You don't need to get the correct mating point between the two gears. In this one you do, in Fed 2 you do, in Fed 1 you do, and so on. I don't have a list of which camera is designed in which way. I assume all Feds are this way, and all Zorkis probably up to Zorki 4 or prior to Zorki 4, I don't know. I only worked so far on Zorki 1, Fed 2, Zorki 4, and that's pretty much it, I think. I did take apart a couple of Zorki 5s and 6s, Zeniths, and that's about it. But for instance, the Zorki 3, it's a the Fed 3, it's a Fed 2. They are identical, except for the top plate and the slow speeds that the 3 has and the 2 doesn't. But everything else is identical, so this one is like this one as a design, but the shutter is pretty much the same. Anyhow, small variations, it doesn't matter. Okay, what I was trying to say. When you are getting everything back together and you cock the shutter, so you wind the shutter to its cocked position, this little piece has to be in the exact correct position. There is no way around it. And this is the latch for the second curtain, and this is what determines the position. So I will get, I think I've got some ribbon that is not where it's supposed to be. This is the consequence of the lack of tension on the rollers. I eventually got it to work. And this is its cocked shutter position. This is the latch of the second curtain. It needs to go here. Like this. And this is the position of the latch when it's loaded with the spring that I will not put back right now. So the latch has a groove, and this piece must fall within the groove when the shutter is cocked. That way the shutter will stay open while the latch is in down position. When the latch moves in its up position, the shutter is released. So that part is correct. Well, the camera is back together, but there is one big issue, and this is the issue. Right now it's set on B. I don't have the bottom flat spring, so it stays open when it's set on B. This is the problem. I have 2.5 millimeters of second curtain exposed through the film gate, and to correct that I will have to take it all apart again. I will have to unglue both the second curtain and the ribbons of the first curtain from their drum and rollers and re-glue them. And I'll try to explain why this is the case. Well, first of all, I did double check all my measurements. So the length of the curtains, the ribbons, the attachment points, everything. The attachment points were a no-brainer. I mean, I scribed the line with the old curtains in place, and I was very precise about it. I have no reason to believe I did anything wrong at that stage. The lengths of everything, again, double checked, triple checked. I superimposed this. Well, this could be one of the issues, the fact that it's all broken up, but it wouldn't account for such a big difference. The thing is, the drum is locked on the shaft of the shaft with the two rollers via this little gear that is now hidden, but I will take off these guys because I don't need them anymore. So this gets out of the way, and this gets out of the way. And now we are back to the basics. So this gear, let's call it a gear, is the one that has the pin on the underside. That pin engages in the hole in the drum and locks the drum in respect to the upper roller, right? Because the upper roller has a ledge of metal, and the hole for the pin is on the left side. So if the drum tries to rotate clockwise, the pin will stop it against the ledge. All right. This piece with the pointy thing needs to fall when the shutter is cocked within the groove of the second curtain latch. Otherwise the camera cannot function. All right. That means if this stops here or here, it won't work. Problem is that you need to get the timing right. So you need to get the correct meshing between these two gears. Now, usually when this happens, I just take it out and reassemble it one tooth to the left or to the right, depending on where this little bit falls. I tried that, and it's not okay. The next position, so next +1, let's say, tooth for this gear will take this bit somewhere around here, so it will overlap with the latch, and that's a problem. And this means that the only solution is to actually move the curtain. So I have to move the curtain backwards, and that means the insertion point, the attachment point, needs to move counterclockwise. Now, when I'm doing that, I will automatically increase the gap between the two curtains, and that means I will increase the shutter speeds. So what was 500th of a second now will be 200 maybe. So that's a bad thing. In order to keep everything constant, I need to also back off the two ribbons. And that is not going to be a nice thing to do. First of all, I need to make sure that I know exactly how much I'm moving them. But actually I have to move them by the amount that is inside the film gate, and maybe add a bit of extra. So right now I have about 2.5 and I should have about 1 millimeter inside the crate, so that means 3.5 millimeters that way. And let's see, how can I made a little mark where the first curtain sits in uncocked position in respect to the film gate. And let's see if I have anything that I can use. Well, it's about the width of this screwdriver, and that is 3 millimeters. And that means that if I move both with 3.5 millimeters, this will be inside the film gate, and that is not good. Okay, that means I'll have to move the second curtain more than I'm moving the first curtain. And I will try to get them as close to the film gate as possible in order to keep the gap as small as possible. Okay, let's measure it again. Now I've got 2 millimeters here, 2.5 on the bottom and 2 on the top, so it's a bit crooked, although it shouldn't be. So I'd say second 3 millimeters. All right, and for the first one, let's double check the sign. I'm taking it off and I will measure the distance from the edge of the film gate to the first of the two signs, and that is the maximum amount that I can reposition the first curtain, and hopefully we'll get something. The bad thing is that as of right now I have no way of knowing what the correct attachment points were, and that means there's little chance that the shutter will work as intended, because the gap between the two curtains is critical for getting the correct speeds. Right now I can only get them in the correct ballpark for having a functional camera, because in theory the error that you can have and still get correct shutter times or shutter speeds is, I don't know, 0.1, 0.2 millimeters at best, and I'm in the realm of full millimeters right now. So we'll see how things go. And yeah, this sucks for sure. This totally sucks. I don't know why this happened. Maybe they were not the original curtains. That would perhaps explain the difference. And I'm losing screws again. Although, seeing how totally wasted the material was, they certainly looked original. Maybe it was poorly manufactured from the first time it left the factory. Although, being an early model, it was supposed to be well made, or not necessarily well made, but better made. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't think I made a mistake, because I don't know what I could have done wrong. And right now, of course, I am very upset with myself that I decided to go ahead and glue the curtains without first determining that everything is okay. That was a mistake. Now I have to unglue them. Alright, first of all, this is the first sign. This was the actually this was the first sign. This is the second one. The second one is the correct one, and I will try to measure it. And I was right. It is the length or the width of this, and this I said was 3, right? Yup, it's exactly 3 millimeters. So first, if I move them both by 3 millimeters, then I will have both edges, actually both edges of the curtains flush with the edges of the film gate, which is not not very good. I mean, I should have like at least half a millimeter here and half on the other side. I think ideally 1 millimeter on each side, but probably that depends on the shutter. Okay, so that's that. And now, see, this is the mark, this is the material, I'm on the mark. This is the mark, this is the material, I'm on the mark. Well, it is what it is, I suppose. Well, after a lot of trial and error and getting 5 years older already, I got it working, I guess. So, this prong is within the groove, a bit at the limit, but it's okay. And this is B. Now none of the curtains is visible. I have about 1 millimeter on the second curtain and 1 millimeter or so on the first curtain, so I suppose my repositioning is finally okay. What I would like to do before taking it apart again for the final gluing of curtains, curtain and ribbons, is actually get this stuff back together. So the shutter speed control, in order to, which one was it? This one. In order to see how the fast speeds are acting. The idea is that if the gap is too large, then the fast speeds will be very slow. Now, I could probably squeeze around maybe 1 millimeter in total by repositioning them even closer, so in such a way that this distance, so the distance between the film gate and the end of the curtain is, I don't know, half a millimeter, and another half on the other side. It's a bit risky, so I might skip it. We'll see. Let's get this one back, and this one is like this. This was quite the adventure. Quite the adventure. I didn't expect it to go down this way. I had no reason to think the initial markings were wrong. But I guess that's what can happen when you are dealing with a camera that is not at least partially functioning when you started the disassembly. There's no way to check for the usual suspects, so yeah, I guess that's what it is. This is B. This should be 1/20th. Alright, and this should be 1/500th of a second. looks Soviet, and I will test it on my CRT display. It looks quite good. I'll turn off the lights. It's probably about one stop too slow. Yeah, I'll probably try to squeeze a bit more out of it tomorrow, because I've wasted my entire working day today trying to get it back, seeing that there's a problem, taking it apart again, and I did it a lot of times. But now I have a pretty good idea of how much I need to compensate for, because I know how much of the curtain was inside the film gate before, I know where it is now, and I have my markings for before and after, so I'll pretty much have to be somewhere in between, more to the after mark, because I am a lot closer to the correct position now that I was than I was before. So before I had 2 millimeters, almost 2.5 within the film plane, so inside the film plane, and now I've got about 1 and a bit behind the film gate. So I'm closer now than I was before. Pretty much I will glue them permanently just a smidge towards the film gate for both of the curtains, and that will be that, and that's it. There is a great possibility that the entire thing wasn't calculated correctly from the very beginning. The good part is that it has potential. It's quite smooth, and right now I feel the tension is a bit high on the curtains. I mean, see, it's like shooting an arrow. It's a bit too fast. And the tension is on the low side. So it's like 2 complete turns for the second curtain and 4 complete turns for the first curtain. And that means I will use an even lower tension, something more like what it's recommended for a Leica Model 3 as a starting point, and that is 1 3/4. Yeah, 1 3/4 for the second curtain and 3 full turns for the first curtain, and I'll see how that goes. Adjusting the shutter will be quite messy because of this issue. Yeah, we'll see. Also, this screw is way too long. This one is okay, and I have this short one that I'll probably use here, and another long one here in the back that will probably not allow for this. To be seated probably. I think the screw is straight here. I mean, the tip of the screw is exactly where the top plate sits. But worst case scenario, I'll just trim them down, and that will be that. Alright, so I guess a couple more days and I'll have a functional Zorki 1. Yeah, hopefully. Okay, see you next time.